they had salvaged as much stuff as they could from this wreck that was just loaded with all this Greek booty. Hello and welcome back to Oscar Underwater. Now, in the first two episodes, we covered who shot the first underwater footage ever, and then who shot the first underwater footage in a proper underwater cinematography kit, meaning a camera stuffed inside a housing of some sort, and where the diver jumps into the water and swims around and shoots footage, which would be the most traditional definition of an underwater filmmaker. And that turned out to be Hans Haas. He jumped into the water in 1939 and released his first short film called Pirsch unter Wasser, which means stalking underwater, in 1940. In 1942, Jacques Cousteau had released his first underwater film called 18 Meters Deep. Now, the thing about these two films, while fascinating and captivating to any audience who had seen the footage, they realized that soon afterwards people were going to start demanding that they wanted to see the footage the way that you see it with your eyes, which was in color. So if you notice that the first two films that we've mentioned in the history of underwater cinematography is that they're black and white. And so, of course, people wanted to start seeing these things and how they actually looked in color. So, unfortunately, people jumped on filmmaking immediately. So even as the technology was being developed, cameras and film stock, etc., people's demands started desiring to see, bigger and better, if you will. And so Kodak started working on color film into the in the 30s is when they started releasing some of their expert color film stock. Up until then, as an aside, real quick, the black and white footage films that were being made, and this is topside stuff, movies and documentaries that were being shot since the invention of film at the turn of the century, they started coloring them sort of in a roundabout way. So one of the ways they would do this is to have transparent color wheels rotating in front of a film projector that would then sort of give color to the film as it was projected, and different hues would cover the film. And so that sort of appeased a little bit of that desire to see color film. Then they started dyeing films, right? They started dyeing the film sort of in a similar way where it wasn't true to the color that was there, in whatever it was that was being shot, but again, it gave color to the film, and then eventually they actually started stenciling color into each frame in which they would color the objects in the picture. But that's if they were shooting 24 frames per second, that's a lot of film to cover if you're shooting a movie or something. So long, arduous process. So it wasn't until Kodak in the mid 30s started releasing their color film stock. Unfortunately, it was new technology, and so it was expensive, and only the big studios could really afford to purchase and shoot with this stuff. And coincidentally, 1939 being the release of two of Hollywood's sort of biggest color spectaculars, which was one was Gone with the Wind and the other was Wizard of Oz, and just Wizard of Oz alone is a color bonanza. So it was something that the people really did want to see a lot. So eventually people would get there, but it wasn't until in our world of underwater cinematography, it wasn't until 1948 that Jacques Cousteau was able to finally get some color 16 millimeter stock, a smaller film stock that's used a lot for documentary filmmaking, etc. And so in 1948, he got some color film stock and dove a shipwreck and then released the film called Carnet de Plongée, which I'm probably mangling, is French for diving log. And diving log, just for those of you who don't know what it is this. It's just a log in which we write down all of the information about the dives that we take, depth, gases that we use, location, weather, everything that you need to sort of remember what the dive was about. And as a diver, it helps you as you build your skills. As you dive more and more, you have a history of all of your dives, and then for the filmmaker, it also helps to log down everything that you shot if you're going to be editing a film later. Also, as another aside, some people do use those diving logbooks, but for the most part, we use these wrist computers now, which pretty much take all the information you need about the dive as far as depth and gases, etc., and will just keep the information for you, and you download it into your computer or whatever. And then some people maybe just keep a log in their old memory locker up here. Although my memory locker leaks, so I do have to write things down to remember them. Okay, so a little backstory on Carnet de Plongée. We have to sort of go back a few years. In fact, we have to go back 2,100 years to the year 80 BC. The Romans are at war with Greece, and the Roman general Lucius Cornelius Sulla has just sacked Athens. And so to the winner the spoils, which means he took all the Greek stuff and loaded it on his ships and was sending it back to Rome. Unfortunately, one of the ships didn't make it back. Scientists think presumably a storm drove the ship off, and it wrecked off the coast of northern Africa near a town by the name of Mahdia in Tunisia. This wreck laid sunken and lost for over 2,000 years. And in 1907, some sponge divers were diving and they found it. Within, I think, 20 years, they had salvaged as much stuff as they could from this wreck that was just loaded with all this Greek booty. And they found marble columns and statues, etc., stuff that's in museums to this day. But they didn't take all of it. Some of the stuff was too inaccessible for the technology they had at this time. So 31 years later, Jacques Cousteau and his film crew dove the wreck, and it was the first time that color film was used to shoot underwater footage. So in 1948, when Jacques Cousteau goes down and shoots this film in color, you can imagine, and maybe that's not all of us, but I can imagine how excited I would have been to know that I'd be seeing, color underwater footage. And he quickly shot many films afterwards, which got better and better as far as the footage. If you watch this film below, you're going to notice that, it ain't the Wizard of Oz as far as, that color spectacular. The one thing that Cousteau and other filmmakers would have quickly realized when they jumped in the water to shoot, which all underwater cinematographers, have to deal with and learn to deal with, is that light play underwater is way different than above water, right? So topside, light can be controlled way simpler than it can underwater. And so they realize that as you dive deeper, it gets dark really quick. And in 1948, the technology just wasn't there. That the film stock, wasn't able to give you clear images if the light was too low, and it didn't take much. So they had that to deal with. And the other thing that they would have learned, that we all learn, is that we lose color off the spectrum as you go deeper. So you start losing your reds and your oranges first, and then eventually you're just kind of left with a nice deep green hue or blue hue to work with. Now in modern day, with the digital cameras, if you can shoot raw footage, you're just collecting data. It makes it that much easier to color correct this footage. And if you watch the film, you're going to notice something really interesting. There's a diver that's holding a lamp. So it was that difficult to get footage underwater, especially if you want to go, anywhere past 10, 15 feet. It was probably already going to get too dark, regardless if it was the middle of the day. So they took lights down, and you'll see a guy with a big lamp. And of course, in 1948, this I don't know, but I'm assuming that batteries probably weren't something that you could could take down. They were probably the size of small Priuses at the time. I'm not sure, but so the way they powered the light was that it was still tethered. It was still attached to a power cable that ran back up to the ship, and so you'll see the diver pointing the light for the cinematographer, and it's still attached to the ship to get power for that light. So I thought that was really interesting and unique that I hadn't seen before. Okay, so Jacques Cousteau enters his film, Carnet de Plongée, into the 1951 Cannes Film Festival. Now, while he doesn't win any awards for it, he does return with other films over the years, and in 1956, he actually wins the Palme d'Or, which is the Cannes Film Festival Grand Prize, and that was for the widely known film, probably his greatest work that he's recognized for, which was The Silent World, based on a book he had written just a couple years earlier. And the interesting thing about that, the winning that prestigious award, was that no documentary had ever won it before, and no documentary would win it again until 2004. So that was quite an honor for Jacques Cousteau to have, as the only one who held the honor for a documentary for a really long time. I think it was Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 that finally got the Palme d'Or in 2004. All right, so there you have it. Jacques Cousteau shot the first underwater color film footage with Carnet de Plongée in 1948. He would go on to shoot over 120 documentaries, including 9 seasons of a TV show called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. And if you're a fan of any of those wildlife shows as a kid, as I was in the 70s, like Wild Kingdom, they were fascinating. And to see stuff underwater definitely inspired me. It would be a long time before I myself was able to do anything similar. So stay tuned for our next episode. We will cover more Jacques Cousteau. I will cover more Jacques Cousteau as we go on. I mean, with so much stuff and him being such a pioneer, right? Because if you don't know anything about Jacques Cousteau, you know, he wasn't just an underwater filmmaker. He was an oceanographer, explorer, co-inventor of what is now considered your scuba underwater tank, right? He co-invented the aqua lung, which was a regulated way of getting air on demand, with a tank and some mouthpieces and hoses. So he did a lot, and with so many productions under his belt, I'm sure that we will be revisiting his work as we go on here. Please join me again, and thanks for watching Oscar Underwater.